Hello and welcome to another Playwire Live. This is a really exciting topic. We're talking about ad tech essentials for content creators, and I'm joined by Playwire COO Stacy Willis. Hi, Stacy. How are you?
Hi, Sammy. I'm great. Excited to be here chatting with you.
I'm excited to have you. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sami Cone, host of the Sami Cone Show, and I get the joy of moderating this selfishly. Stacy, this is just a one-on-one that I wanted to have with you, but we do have some other great questions that have been coming in. If you want your question answered, make sure to submit it in the comments below. We're going to do our best to get to as many of those. But Stacy, can we first of all, like if someone wants that nugget right away, when they're talking about ad content, what are we talking about when we're talking about monetization, ads, and everything that encompasses that?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, we're really going to be focused on how to monetize your owned and operated property, being your website for the most part. I think creators probably know a lot about monetization streams in general, but maybe specifically around ads is sometimes a blind spot, or it can be highly technical. And so it can be pretty complex. So we want to help demystify some of that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. Obviously, there's a lot in the news today about certain social media platforms maybe even going away. A lot of people monetize in a lot of different ways. We're talking about monetization. We're just talking about making money and how online creators can do that. Why is it so important, in your opinion, to own your own property, to own your own website, blog, something of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I liken it to the difference of renting versus owning. You're investing in your future, really. If you're renting your audience via social media property, doesn't mean it's not a great way to get in front of people and get exposed to them. But you are very much at the whim of whatever their algorithms do or change, and your visibility can go up and down and disappear overnight. So building your own property where you can drive people and maintain community and engagement with your audience on your own place is huge for future proofing your business and making sure you're getting that flywheel where it doesn't require necessarily you to post to make money. You can have it kind of working in the background for you. Posting, of course, helps, but it becomes a lot more consistent and streamlined than the typical like social media post, bunch of views, disappears.
Yeah, I love that you said future proofing. I think that's a great way to think about it. You know, we're probably going to throw around terms like passive income and monetization and ad revenue, all of that. So when we're looking at placing ads on a site that we own, speaking of renting versus owning, a
Yep.
lot of people, I think one of the pushbacks is like, what is the technology that's involved? How much tech do I need to know? Do I need to know the back end of WordPress, HTML, all of those real kind of codey words? Demystify that for us. What's the truth around placing ads on our website?
Yeah, so we flex to the level of our creator that we're working with. If you have someone who's just starting out, they might have a WordPress theme. They're like, give me a plugin and I don't want to touch anything else. Just make it happen. Make sure I like it. But then we also have up to the higher end of creator who's like, they manage their own forum. They coded the whole thing and they want to be really intricate about where they place what. And what's really great about the technology we've built is we can flex to the needs of the creator on the other side, because really it's our belief that our job is to support your business in the way that you want to run it and not necessarily force our way on you. So we try and flex to the needs.
Okay. And I don't want to spend too much time on this question because I figure if people are here learning about ad revenue monetization, they probably have this already. But what is required when we're talking about this? Who are the players in the game? What do we need in order to get started with ad revenue and monetization?
It depends on how detailed you'd like to be in terms of your technical control of the details. It can be as little as just the owner operator of the website, and particularly if it's a WordPress site, it's really easy to put a plugin and then all of the work can happen on our side. We have support from tech solutions, people on our team that can give guidance. And then if you are someone who wants a little bit more of the technical levels of control, then you're going to want to bring in your developer to the conversation with us. Yeah. But it should be relatively simple and you can scale it up or down as needed.
Yeah, let me ask you about a concern I know some people have. I know for me, I didn't run ads on my website for a really long time because I didn't like how it looked on my site. So when we're talking about there's the tech side and the back end, but then there's that visual and there's the user experience in particular. So have you, as you know, in your role at Playwire, have you found a way to kind of marry that symbiosis between having things work really well, robustly, but also not interfering with the user experience? And how can I as a creator um, kind of interface with you all and come alongside to make it what I want it to be?
You bet. So there's two categories I'm actually going to put this in. There's one which is very much just preference based. Sometimes you have creators who are like, I don't like the way it looks like that, and it doesn't matter to me anything else. It's not what I want.
Right.
And then there's data-based decision making around, let's look at my user engagement metrics and see if adding an ad in this position changes anything. So we try and help flex to both of those needs, because your website is your brand, is an extension of you, and it should look the way you want. But also we are here to help inform you and say, like, hey, let's test a placement and see if it changes session length, see if it makes people bounce, and then we can make decisions based off of that. So we do a lot of both of those. But at the end of the day, most creators aren't going to go a DIY route, which means that they're not going to go like work with AdSense or Google Ad Manager directly and then put all the code on page. So historically, they've been forced into using a monetization partner. And I say that it sounds terrible because we're a monetization partner, but the options that have been around on the market for a long time haven't involved a lot of choice. It's like, hey, here's a layout and how your ads are going to look, and you don't get a lot of choices. So there wasn't a lot of that back and forth to help it get to a place where it represented what the creator wanted it to look like. It was like all or nothing. You take this layout, and if you don't like it, too bad. So I think that's also part of the problem that's historically been there that might have stopped people from using ads.
Yeah, and I think, some of us that are OGs that have gone back about 20 years in the online space, there used to be a lot of selling of individual ads, right? A company came to us and said, we want a banner ad on your site, or we want this. Is that still a thing that you're seeing in the industry? And if so, is that something that can play well with, not just Playwire, but any ad network? Is there that hybrid that's still available, would you say, or do you advise against that?
There is. What you will find is that you tend to have to be a certain size to command advertisers really wanting to come from you and turning it into a consistent, repeatable revenue stream, rather than something that's like, hey, here's a couple $100 once off.
Right.
And so that's where the kind of best of both worlds comes in. We have a full direct sales team behind our platform, and we sell the sites within our network available to advertisers directly, but more in a bulk setting. So it makes sense. I don't have to go to 300 websites to go and get the reach I'm looking for. I can go to one person, get it across that 300 websites. And then we also get to add in some fun things like highly creative, customized interactions. So things like site skins, which are really hard to do on your own, takes a lot of technical expertise. Yeah. But if we can sell them at scale across 300 sites, all of a sudden for advertisers, that's like the big ticket. So usually you're going to get access to a lot more direct sales dollars if you're sold packaged in with others than if you try and go to market solo.
And I love that you said that. I feel like that's a new trend that's happening, site skins. That's something that I've only seen really on like IMDb or something, where basically, for those of you that don't know, you're almost like wrapping the whole site in an ad for lack of a better word. And I think, without you saying it, that's a great reason to partner with an ad network like you all, because you're doing that heavy lifting for us in a sense when you're able to sell to multiple platforms and multiple advertisers. But I mean, let's face it, we all still want to work with who we want, and we want to customize. So if someone like me who has a family friendly site, or wants to exclude certain brands, certain categories, how easy or hard is that to do?
So categories are easy. Specific brands can be really hard when you're trying to incorporate programmatic ads. And that's more because of the ecosystem that exists behind the scenes. So there's this whole supply chain, much the same way you might think of like furniture going through a supply chain, particularly if it's made in China, and then it gets on a boat and is shipped here, and then it gets placed in a store, and then you go to the store, you find it, you buy it. There's a whole lot of players up that stream that have some bearing on what that couch looks like by the time it gets to you. Sure. And so very similar in the advertising industry, when you're really trying to bring in programmatic advertising, which means anybody anywhere can bid on inventory and buy, it's very easy to exclude full categories and make wide like cuts, I would say, to what you allow on your site. Specific brands can be very hard to track down through all of those little players in the background. It's doable, it's possible. It just usually costs extra to be able to do it because you have to initiate different tools within the tech stack. And so what we've done is find really like safe ways to get the categories pretty dang dialed in. And then for the most part, the rest of it doesn't really seem to cause any problems. If there are cases here and there where we want to block an advertiser, we block and tackle those on an individual basis as they come up.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's so many things I want to get to that you've said. You've given us a lot of great nuggets already. And again, if you're just joining us, remember, you can get your questions in. Just make sure to pop them in the chat below. But one of the things that you mentioned was just the ease of kind of there's a plug and play that's involved, right? But if we want to go to that next level, if we have some creators listening that are like, this at first I thought, oh, it'll just be that passive income. Like I said, I'll make some money as I sleep. And now it's like, oh, I want to really do something with this. What is that next level advice that you would give to the creator that is actually, really making their full-time income from their website, that's wanting to really test without messing up the good that's happening? Because I think that's always the fear, right? Like, let's not mess with a good thing, but how do we take it to the next level?
Sure. So as a gate to be able to do this, you have to have a partner who's willing to be a little bit more flexible with you. Otherwise, your information will fall on deaf ears. Sure. But what I would say, and most creators who are making their money from their website are probably already going to be doing this, is know the experience on your site really well. It's going to make you very informed about what the best placement for ads potentially could be. So it's knowing which pages on your site generate the longest time on page. It's knowing where people scroll and where do they stop and hang out in one place on the page for a long time. Understanding how people tend to use your site gives you a lot of insight to have really great conversations, very strategic conversations with a partner about where to place ads and how to really build a full-scale ad strategy across your site that's more than just standard layouts. I would say, now, the reason there is standardization to layouts is that like 9 times out of 10, we've really thought about the typical use case for websites and their different structures and layouts. But knowing your own allows us to add those little nuggets of customization where it's going to make a big bang.
Yeah. So let's go through that, because I know I like to get some practical tips at the end of these. So what would be your advice and maybe some bullet points to, even though we can set and forget, what are the things that content creators should be paying attention to in their dashboard with their ad network, and how often? It's kind of like the scale, right? If you're trying to lose weight, they tell you not to look at the scale every morning, right?
Right. Yes.
So how often should we actually be looking at these things so that we're in this for the long game? Things don't necessarily change overnight, but you also don't want to ignore something and then have an issue pop up and not be aware of it.
Yep. So I'm going to give 2 categories here, some that are very ad revenue based, and then some that are very much like that you're going to go to look at Google Analytics. You're going to understand your audience makeup a little bit more. So the metric I'd recommend everybody who's using ad revenue in any form to know is your revenue per session. So it's really easy to look at revenue on a per page view basis. It's easy to look at revenue as like a top line number. But what you want to do is break it down into a unit of measurement that stays consistent as your traffic scales up and down. And then the best way to do that is revenue per session, because what'll happen is if you start to overdo it with your ads, you'll start to see session lengths get shorter. People get frustrated, they leave earlier, and your revenue per session will go down as well. So if you're really maximizing and optimizing for revenue per session, you're going to make sure you're not overdoing it with ads and keeping that session length nice and long. So that's the number one metric I'd say to look at. And then in Google Analytics or your ad provider, if they provide this level of detailed analytics, not everybody does, is more information about your breakdown per session. And so it can be things like traffic sources. You'll find that organic traffic is going to generate naturally longer session lengths than paid ad traffic and things like that. So if you start to see a change in the way you're driving traffic, you could be losing traffic from a source where revenue per session, where session length is nice and long, and gaining traffic from a source where session length is really short. And that's going to have an effect on your revenue per session as well. So understanding major changes in your traffic makeup are also going to help give you clues as to what's changing your ad revenue if it's not a change in your layout. So sources are really big, looking for changes in things like operating system or tech or browser. So certain browsers have cookies and certain browsers don't. And your ads are worth a lot more on browsers with cookies. So if you suddenly see a big change where you lose Chrome traffic and gain Safari traffic, you're going to see lower ad revenue from the same number of sessions. So it's keeping track of some of those.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's the best way to keep track of some of that? And do you recommend like a weekly, like what would
Mhm.
your routine be that you advise so that we're on top of it without obsessing over it?
So I would say your top level metrics are going to be revenue per session and total number of sessions. If
Mhm.
those things are both staying pretty consistent, you're fine.
Okay.
Where you really want to start digging in is if you see either one of those start to like do weird things, jump around, go up, go down. That's when you go start looking at session makeup to say, is this part of the problem? So I would just really focus on the top levels, and then those deeper levels are more for troubleshooting. If you're like, I don't understand why this
Mhm.
number is going up or down, and that can help you go understand.
Mhm. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. I feel like I should put a disclaimer like, those like you're not a medical professional. This isn't actual legal advice. You don't work for Google. This isn't,
Mhm.
but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about this whole Google algorithm, everything that has come up. I know a lot of us have taken traffic hits, and it's not a one-off, right? It happens. So even we don't know algorithms on some of the social media platforms. Same thing with websites. How do we ride that wave? And are there things that we can do if some of us have taken hits in some of that organic traffic?
So at the end of the day, there's some advice I can give, and some I just there's very much I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing that I know a lot of people are concerned about right now is AI content
Right.
outranking real content.
Right.
I imagine Google's doing a lot to work on that, but I actually don't necessarily have an answer on how well they're going to do at picking out the differences. I can tell you humans, when they get to the site, are pretty dang good about picking out the differences, and they're going to like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And what happens for the most part with everything Google does is that they're solving for the user. So if they really are seeing like users not staying long on those AI sites, but they hang out longer on your sites, eventually things are probably gonna like even back out to where they were. But the biggest advice I'd give for creators is to think like your user. We tend to take a lot of SEO tips and tricks as
Yeah.
gospel and like shove them all on the page without thinking about the experience it happens to have on the user themselves. So you're never going to be wrong for backing up from your website and say to my website, are they standing in the store looking at ingredients if I'm a recipe site? Or are they sitting at their computer on like a desktop sized screen reading my content when they're working? It's really thinking through what are the places that your users are engaging with your site? How are they doing that? And can you even think about ways to adjust your website structure and style to like make it the best experience for them? That's really what I would focus on.
I love that you said that. Not that I need any of this advice myself, of course, because I'm an expert in asking you these questions. But again, for those of us that have been doing it for a while, as helpful as things like this are, the education, the conferences, the online courses, sometimes those of us providing the content get so wrapped up in that we forget to just step back and think, why did we start doing this in the first place? Because we loved writing or we love
Mm-hmm.
photography or creating recipes, like you said. So, goodness, that's going to be a takeaway for me to just
Yep, step
step
back.
back and just, look at it through a different set of eyes. Okay, we are nearing the end of our time together already, which I cannot believe.
Went
Before we get to
fast.
I know it does go fast. This has been so good. And we have another question from someone, but before that, I wanted to ask, is there a percentage that you recommend that ad revenue should play in someone's bigger monetization portfolio, just, on a safe side or on an ideal side? Do you have numbers?
It's so hard to answer that. What I have found that is that it's so different from creator to creator, and it's so different based on like the tendencies of their audience.
Sure.
I have seen, we have some creators where 100% of their revenue comes from ads. They're so focused on their
Wow.
website and they're building a community there and they really want people to come and engage.
Mhm.
And so that's all they focus on. And then we have some creators where we are fourth in line after brand deals, affiliate deals,
Yeah.
service offerings. And what we really try and do is understand a creator's business where they're driving the most revenue from now and say, hey, like, how do we not get in the way of that revenue stream, but make you some extra? So I wish I could give an answer, but I have seen such wildly different ones, and it so depends on the creator.
Well, what I hear you saying from that is that as a creator, we need to know where we want it to fit. And then we can bring that to you or whatever ad network, or whatever in play and say, this is where I want it to be. It's not now, I'd like it to be number 3 in my monetization list, or I'd like it to be number 1. What do I need to do? So not putting the onus on you as the network, but really, again, knowing what we want our business to look like. So I appreciate that as well. Okay, I've got to get this last question, and I promise. I think it was Linda that said, I don't currently run ads on my site because I know they slow site speed. Is there a way to combat that? And is that true?
Yeah, so this is not unsurprisingly a very common question because most people are worried about SEO. So there are definitely ways to make sure that ads aren't slowing down your page's ability to load. Often that comes with delayed loading of ads, where you let the majority of your page content load first and then your ads come in. There's definitely trade-offs in the amount of revenue you can generate. And so we just help publishers make those decisions about what's best for them. Some of it relates to the site speed of the website already. If we already have a really fast website, adding ads doesn't make a lot of difference. But if you have a very slow website already, it can feel like a lot of weight to add ads to it. So some of it is your existing architecture. And then the other thing would be to make sure that you're not overloading the page with too many ads, and then doing things like causing CLS. So cumulative layout shift is one of the core web vitals. And if you're injecting ads where they like more than one size of ad can fit in a certain placement, you will find that sometimes you'll refresh an ad, a bigger ad will load in, and then all the content will shift down. Those are the kinds of things that cause like very negative user experiences and dock you in Google just as much as page speed. So keep that one in mind as well. But every ad provider has definitely taken steps to figure out how do we have the least impact on page speed, us included, and probably almost every other monetization provider you talk to as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Would you say, just to piggyback on that, for someone that doesn't have a web guy or a team, is it something they can come to you or other networks to say, hey, can you help me analyze this? Is it worth investing in someone? What would you say? Because I know a lot of people are afraid to start because they don't want to do it wrong, or they're like, I'm just going to keep it the way it is because it's been working.
For the most part, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure ads aren't a component in a page speed issue for you. We have lots of educational guidance and content about how to improve site speed. For the most part, for creators in particular, your biggest offender is going to be your images. So making sure you have really great image optimization strategies for your website as a whole is probably going to be the best advice I can give that'll apply to the most number of people.
Holy moly, Stacy. Okay. Like, I wish I was here taking notes on the side. So there's been a lot. Before I let you go, what would be your one takeaway that you want to communicate? People have been listening, and the last thing we want to do is overwhelm, right? We give a lot of good information. We don't want someone walking away saying, I don't know where to start. What would be we get off of this live, check this now?
Yeah, I would say we've got, we call it our ad tech resource center. We have an amazing array of content around ad tech, and we particularly have an ad layout online course. So if you're not familiar with ads or where to put them on your site, and you're not ready to have a conversation with somebody who you feel like is going to try and sell you, which I fully understand, I would start there, right? Like, get some knowledge about layout yourself. But also, if you are interested in starting using ads and starting slowly, it's pick a partner who's going to be willing to do that. And it's really easy to test in the outset, because they'll either say, hey, these are the ads you have to use, or they'll say, hey, here's my suggestion for your layout. Let's talk about it. It's just a different approach.
Yeah. Stacy, this has been so good. Once again, you've been listening to Ad Tech Essentials for Content Creators. I've been joined by Stacy Willis, the COO of Playwire. I'm Sami Cone, host of the Sami Cone Show and SamiCone.com. We do this every other Tuesday. So this is just one of the topics we've tackled. We hope you'll join us back here at Playwire Live for another resource soon. Thank you so much, Stacy.
Thanks, Sami. Thanks for hosting.
Absolutely. My pleasure.